Hi, everyone. This is Laura Jackson at Discovering Dyscalculia. And today I'm excited to have an author with me today. And Tanita S. Davis is the award-winning author of 8 novels for middle grade and young adult readers, including Partly Cloudy, Serena Says, Peas and Carrots, Happy Families, and Mare's Wars, which was a Coretta Scott King honor book and earned her a nomination for the NAACP Image Award. She grew up in California. I love this part on the cover. It said she was so chatty as a kid that her mother begged her to just write it down, which is what I also tell my kids. Um, I will also add just that her book, one of her latest books, was recommended to me by a parent, and it's Figure It Out, Henri Weldon. And the main character in the book is a 7th grader who has some very real middle school challenges, and one of them is dyscalculia. So she has a math learning disability. So welcome, Tanita.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I heard about your book because one of the parents that I'm working with supporting uh, a child with dyscalculia, she recommended it. So I was like, what? Because there's just not that many books out about it. And you can find a lot on dyslexia and like other learning differences, but having a child with a math learning disability, I'm always on the lookout for books just to help her process her situation. So I got it right away, and I loved it. There's only a few books, and maybe I mean few by two, um, that, that really accurately talk about how being dyscalculic doesn't just impact math class. And you had so many great examples. So I was reading through and I thought this author she has a deeper understanding than I've seen. And I got to talk to her. There were things like getting lost in the halls at school, which has happened in our family, and locker combinations, yes, math struggles, and yes, the classic like multiplication, but also reading bus schedules and figuring out times and um, day calculations, like how to be on time somewhere and figure out if you have enough time to do something. And so, anyway, how did you so well capture what it is like to have a math learning disability?
Well, I did a lot of the poking around on the internet as you do. I did a lot of reading, but as you said, there's mostly stuff about dyslexia, which is,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, a much more, I don't know. It's so interesting because a lot of the time these things overlap and come together, but
Yeah.
somehow we in our society have decided that, one of them we talk about and one of them we don't.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and I found some books that are for smaller children, and there are a lot of things
Yes.
about, using manipulatives with your kids and this and that, and and how to sort of bump up a child's understanding to get them through the, kindergarten in those early grades. But I couldn't find anything either that was fiction, and I was like,
Mhm.
there has to be something, and there
Yes.
was not.
Yes.
So what I did was stick to the research side. I read a lot of educational psychology. I read a lot about neurodiverse kids. I read, sort of accounts of people who worked with those kids. There are some accounts of students online who they're writing for themselves.
Yeah.
But little by little, I started to think, my experience is valid
Yeah.
and I need to include myself. It's so
Mm.
weird, the thing that we do. We sort of, especially because, you don't want to misrepresent, you don't want to get it
Yeah.
wrong. And so you go to the experts, but my experience is kind of expert too,
Yes.
in as much as
Yes.
this is something that has been a whole thing in my life.
Yeah.
And I remember I started to think about things that were of great disappointment to me. Our classroom was set up in the fifth grade that you could have free time if you passed these timed multiplication
Oh
tests.
my gosh.
So I never, ever, and it was so hard. Everybody else would get the popcorn party, and I'd be like,
Yes. Yeah.
well, I
Just
mean, it was a,
probably waiting for the time to be done, where
yeah.
at least I was like for my daughter, because she would just be quietly kind of looking around, and like she did the one times tables and
And then you
week after
start just
week.
sort of writing stuff,
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
drawing,
drawing,
writing,
making patterns. So yeah,
so much doodling,
yeah, a lot
which
of doodling.
yeah,
So,
which
yeah.
some schools are okay with and some from our experience are not okay with.
No, yeah. That is like somehow proof that you're just not paying attention. And if you would just attend.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. So yeah, that I think that's very interesting, your point about why don't we talk about it as much? And I don't know either. I've heard the research is way behind dyslexia. I'm For some reason um there's less people talking and coming out and saying, hey, I'm dyscalculic. Like more people will say, I'm dyslexic. But the overlap is stunning. Like I think I read somewhere it was like 40% of those who are dyslexic also are dyscalculic.
mhm.
So why in the world are we not talking about it more? So I love that you are. And your point about there are a couple younger books. Yes. And when I look at who is getting my newsletter or joining my parent groups, the very youngest is 9,
Mhm.
and most, I would say, are 11 and older when they find out. So this group of people that you're writing to, like these are the ones that are just finding out about it and trying to find, like, does anyone understand my experience? Does anyone know? And they're really lonely too because they look around and they don't know. I mean, there's probably multiple people that it has to be if it's one in every 20, but
Yeah.
they don't hear these stories. So
Yeah.
um, I love that you did that. Um, so you alluded to your experiences. What was that like growing up, struggling with math, and was obviously no one was talking about it. How did you think about that as a kid?
Well, it was um I it's not too much to say. It was kind of grim.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the 80s.
Yes.
And,
I am a child of the 80s as well. Yes.
and okay, so and then, I'm a minority, so the
Yes.
80s were not a super great time for
Nope.
minorities.
Nope.
Everybody was waiting for black kids to screw up, have a crack baby, and go to jail. So
Yeah.
it felt like, our family, my parents are religiously conservative and politically conservative, and we were
Yep.
very much involved with our church, and I went to a parochial school. And so, you know, and of course, we were also in a mixed community where, it was predominantly people of other races. And so here we are. And I think my parents really felt like there was just a spotlight on us, and we felt
Yeah.
very much compelled to do well, to be good, to
Yeah.
not cause comment,
Yep.
just kind of to stay under the radar sort of thing. And
Yep.
imagine in that environment, in this sort of, you're the mom, who's, carefully trying to be a part of the parent teacher association, and make
Yep.
sure that your family's well represented, and you're starting to get the notes that, well, your daughter's not paying attention in class, and
Yep.
we need to, you guys need to come down and we need to talk about this. And
Yeah. It's
it was
that
hard.
is grim. And with all that on top and that expectation that it wasn't even like an option to probably not try to succeed. It's like
No.
you gotta get through. You gotta, yeah,
And
keep
the
it up.
disappointment wasn't just like we're disappointed, from the teachers,
Hmm.
we want you to be better than this. It was not like about a subject so much as it was like, well, you need to try a little harder. And, a lot of those little talks were, your parents are putting, they're doing their best for you and you really should be. And it
Oh
was
my
like this.
gosh. It just makes me more than cringe.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
implied was I wasn't holding up my end of the bargain. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know,
Let's talk about who's not holding up their end of the bargain here.
shall we?
Schools, grown-ups.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. There was a little bit I saw that in I don't want to give too much about the book because people need to read it. It's so good, but there's that tension between her wanting to play soccer and, the family and teachers being like, "Do you have time to do, like you really need to buckle down with this math stuff." And not, it was a tension there of something she wants to do, something she's really good at, and something that's so empowering, but you have to be good at this math and that's going to require time.
yeah.
There wasn't any other thought about it. So that's really hard. And I think it's a it's a common story. Maybe things are like slowly opening up now, but they definitely weren't in
No,
the
not
80s.
back then.
No.
No, it was, everything that wasn't school was a prize that was dangled out of reach if you
Yeah.
succeed here.
It's
And
really horrible,
yeah.
horrible education style. How did you I wanted to say, how did you figure it out? How did you put it together and when and how old were you and what's that kind of journey, that process of realizing I'm not just bad at math, like and I don't just need to try harder.
It came when I was well out of school, well out of college. I think that because people, for whatever reason, were not very, it is in part the research, I guess, back then, but people didn't have a name for what the problem was.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
I attended tutoring every morning for an entire semester in college to
Okay.
get through one class. And it
Yeah.
was with the professor himself. So he knew that I
Yeah.
was doing my level best. And he would, I mean, the
Yeah.
man gave his own time to me before
Yeah.
class started for 30 minutes every single day.
Yeah.
And I got out of that class with pride with a D.
Yeah.
That was the
Yeah.
lowest grade that I had in my entire college career.
Yeah.
But I was proud of the D in a really weird, way because
Hey,
it's a passing grade.
it is a
I
passing grade
passed.
and you worked your butt off to get there. Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And
And in
it's
a
be-
place where no one is acknowledging what the real issue is. And yeah, so you did, you triumphed in there.
yeah, so I mean, but when the professor didn't keep saying anything along the lines of, if you'd pay more attention, when
Mm,
he just said, "No, this is where you've made the mistake," and backed me up and walked me through it, I realized,
yeah,
okay, so it's not sort of a you should have gotten this, I didn't get that feedback from him and I
yeah,
realized, okay,
yeah.
this might be actually something and not just in my head, like there's
Hmm.
something wrong with me.
Yeah.
I mean, because, part of the reason I think that so few people talk about dyscalculia or dyscalculia, which is what I ended up calling it. It's one of those words you read and you've never heard.
You can say it
But
however you want.
yeah,
It's
I
so
mean,
complicated.
dyscalculia actually makes sense. But one of the reasons I think people don't talk about it is this entire society has a shame response around mathematics.
Yes.
Somehow, I
Hmm.
don't know why, but reading, we can, there's the idea that, either more people were open about their struggle with it, or, you know, it's something that not a lot of, everyone doesn't find entertaining or whatever. So they're like, well, as long as you can read street signs or whatever, it's fine. You don't
Uh-huh.
have to read for fun. You don't have to,
Yeah.
you can sort of get through it or whatever. Maybe that there's that attitude, but
Yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
attitude that math is with you and everything and that you absolutely must, and it's a terrible, terrible thing if you don't have skill in it. I don't know. But since there
Yeah.
was no name for it, and there was no response that I got that was shocked that I wasn't getting it, I actually
Yeah.
started doing some reading in my 30s. Now I was working at that time in education, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's like you're starting to I worked for the state of California in a group home situation. My students were truant from about fifth grade.
Yeah.
Many of them, based on their parents and sort of the ramshackle way they were being raised, they had a
Yeah.
lot of school days they missed. But then coming back, we were doing a lot of remedial stuff where they are, in junior high, but they're just being
Mm-hmm.
introduced to fractions and all of that.
Right.
And
It's the
some of,
first time they've been able to maybe even gauge in this with all the
yeah,
other things you can't learn when you're in
no,
chaos and
yeah,
trauma. So, yeah.
exactly. And so, and then some of them had struggles from there. And so it was understanding how to teach them
Mm-hmm.
based on the struggles that I had. Now, I do find it interesting that I don't know if this is something that happens for a lot of people, but I find it
Mm-hmm.
sometimes easier to understand a thing, even temporarily, because
Mm-hmm.
most of my learning mathematically, it comes and goes. But
Yep.
I can explain a concept and we can do the problems together,
Uh-huh.
and it helps me to explain it to someone else. It helps it stick in my mind
Yeah.
for a little longer.
Yep.
And I found as I taught my students in the way that made sense to me, that
Yeah.
some of them were able to grasp onto it when I gave them the little hints and the ways that I did them.
Yeah.
And they were being tested because
Yeah.
this is a state run home, and so they're being tested, and I'm looking, yeah, they're here, they are, they're showing signs of the dyslexia, and they
Mm-hmm.
have some, at the time they were calling them math deficits and that sort of thing, and
Yeah.
there still wasn't like a specific name, but it was very
Yeah.
clear. I was like,
Yep.
huh, I think that might be me too.
Yeah.
And it was a good time. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that job. Simply just saying, okay, we none of us know anything today. We're gonna
Yes.
sit down and we're gonna learn a thing. And it
Yeah.
it was a gift for me to be able to take the pressure off somebody else, you
Oh my
know?
gosh. Yes. Yes. I was also just thinking how I've been learning about the term emotional regulation from my friend Brenda, who works with ADHD students. And I was just thinking that's so helpful in that realm that you're sitting with them and they're not alone. And they have somebody who is curious about their experience and isn't saying, you should know this, or you should have learned this, or you need to try harder. But someone is sitting there with them saying, um, let's figure out how to make this make sense. Let's think about how you think about numbers, and just like that's so calming. And I bet just gave them the opportunity to be able to think about it. And you didn't have to have all the answers, you were
Yeah.
exploring it with them. Um, but that's actually so freeing, I think. What difference has that made for you now as an adult to know about about this neurodiversity part of yourself, and as you look back, like what kind of impact has that had for you?
It really makes a difference to the things that I look back on and felt so much failure about.
Yeah.
My dad, my dad was a, very strict disciplinarian, very much of the you're not measuring up here, so we're going to do something about it. And every
Mhm.
single day in the summertime, before every meal, I had to recite my times tables.
Oh no, Tanita, I'm so sorry. Oh gosh. Whew,
And
that's so
memorizing
stressful.
them was the only thing that I could do. But it's noise.
Yes, you're almost memorizing the sounds of
I I did memorize the sounds. And when you skip, because the rhythm isn't right. So
Mhm.
essentially it was a song. And
Mhm.
and eventually I learned it, although the eights, I don't know what
The
it is
eights were
about
not
eights, man.
sticking.
Yeah, the eights weren't sticking, but I mean, and of course, in our family, it wasn't, you don't just do well, you do above. So I actually,
Yeah.
we were meant to learn till to 13.
Oh, a step above.
It's it's so hard. It's so hard.
Um,
I
I'm not dyscalculic and I do not know my 13s either.
Well, and who does? Who
Who
does?
does?
Nobody does that
Who
off the top
does?
of their, well, someone does, but not me.
No,
And
a very
so
special
looking,
few.
yeah, I mean, and good for them. It's
Right.
awesome to be able to do math in your mind. It's awesome to do all of that stuff. But,
Yeah.
looking back as an adult now, realizing that was never going to happen,
Yeah.
it's a relief that
Yeah.
it wasn't just like, I don't know. To a certain extent, I think kids almost think, why can't I just do what I'm supposed to do?
Oh,
And there's
yeah. They
that weird
definitely do.
time when you just really blame yourself. And
Yes.
it just knowing that I wasn't somehow in some like back corner of my mind, just being really oppositional and being like, nope, not going to do it. I
Yep.
mean, there's a strange sense of having blamed myself for a lot
Yeah.
of the predicaments, a lot of the trouble I got in, and knowing that it was not a choice on my part and it was a choice in how people chose to deal with it.
Yep. Yep.
You are able to,
Or
I don't
overlook
know,
it.
forgive yourself for just being who
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah.
And it actually frees you to go ahead and embrace who you are and say,
Yeah.
okay, knowing this, what can I do?
Yep. Yep.
So
I love that.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, it just gives you a foundation for saying, okay, knowing this, what's next?
yep.
Where am I going next? Because
Yep.
when you're not trying to dig yourself out of a hole of who you think you are or who you think you're supposed to be,
Yep.
you are freed to be or do anything within your power,
Yep.
And
Yeah,
that
I
just, it
I
makes a
think
big
that's so
difference.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the difference you see between people who have just kept believing those messages, those negative messages about themselves, and so they don't go after things they would love to. And I think
Yeah.
maybe that's the difference of people who are able to acknowledge that challenge side, but go off and like do amazing things like you
Yeah.
have with your writing and really connecting with this is a challenging time of life, the middle school, preteen, that whole time. And I am just saying that because we are in the middle of it with my own teen kids, but having a voice that speaks to all those emotions and the inner thoughts that are happening and the struggles with like differentiating from your parents and going through school, like that is such a gift that you have run with. Another thing I loved about your book is you really focused on Henry's interests and her talents. And can you talk about that? Like, what were you hoping your readers would come away with? You're obviously letting them in, like, hey, if you have these kind of math struggles, there might be something going on. And also, you wrote with the poem writing, the soccer, or or she's like a little social butterfly. What were you hoping? Like, I know there's a message in there that you're hoping your readers will come away without giving too much away because I want them to read it, you know?
I wanted, no one said to me when I was a kid, you have other gifts.
Mm,
No one said that to me. The focus was entirely on what I lacked.
yes.
And I
Yeah.
know that the people who were adults in my life didn't mean that. They didn't mean their advice or their whatever
Yeah.
the way it came out.
Yeah.
But what I heard was the only thing that matters about you is what you don't have, is what you
Mm,
can't do.
yeah.
And I really feel like if nobody tells you that what you have matters,
Hmm.
then you need to learn to tell yourself.
Yes.
And so for me, I think maybe even as an adult writing that, that was sort of revolutionary to me going, oh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not the end of the world. I mean, we have like this whole thing in education. Oh, your permanent record, this is going to go on your permanent record. You have to be careful and you have to think ahead because
Yep.
we almost give kids the idea that school will last forever.
Yes.
It
Yep.
won't.
Yeah.
This is not the most important thing you will do.
Yeah.
Surely learning is the most important thing you'll do, but
Mm.
you will learn over your lifetime. You
Yes.
have time. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be right now. It
No.
doesn't have to be this thing, or you won't get anything else in life.
Yeah.
And the way the educational system is set up, we do a disservice in
Yeah.
creating this anxiety and
Mhm.
creating this, I have
Yep.
to stay with my cohort. I have to be with, these people and I
Yep.
have to get this. And
Yep. And
and
there's one way to learn.
and
Like,
there's only one way to
yeah.
do it exactly. And so much of the emphasis is when you are a kid with a learning disability, all you think of is the minuses about you.
Yes.
And I just wanted to put that sentence in my book so somebody could read it and say, hey, she has other gifts.
Yeah.
Maybe I have other gifts.
Yeah. Yes. And what are those? And what can I do to like pursue those even if nobody around me, like, and there was a little bit of that, like, um well, she had the teacher that believed in her poetry and was like encouraging, and I love that. But the soccer piece, she really kind of went on her own, was like, I'm going to
Yeah.
try this,
Yeah.
and it was a success. So I think you're right. I think even in how we do our test evaluations, we look for all the things that are wrong at the schools, and we don't look at like, well, what were the strengths in this person? What are they good at? And also, how can we like tailor their education to things that they're just like, that would help people thrive so much better, so much more.
Yeah.
And it's more holistic, seeing the whole person here, so um I love
I,
that.
I had the opportunity when I lived in Scotland briefly. My husband was doing his PhD. I had a friend there who's an American friend, and she didn't particularly love the education system there because she was used to American. And she said, well, my daughter's not very good at school and she's not that interested. But they're just sort of shunting her away from, going to university. And I don't think that they should be doing that. They should be, they should spend the time and force her back into line. She needs to do this. And I thought, that, you
Mhm.
can leave school legally at 16 in
Yeah,
the UK. Well, not in the whole UK, in Scotland.
in Scotland, yeah.
And they have a much more focused education system. Number one, you can go back at any point.
Yeah,
So you can
yeah,
always retrain or go back to school if you
yep,
have decided that you want to know something.
yes,
But also they will say, okay, you are not particularly academic minded and this doesn't interest you. What interests you? And they have, where
yeah,
the kids are studying with an adult who does something.
yes,
And they have a different emphasis entirely where,
yeah,
you can go into working with a plumber or you can work on actually working a job or learning how to do, pottery or whatever.
yes.
It's
Wow, talk
not.
about options for learning. I mean, you would
Yeah.
learn so much. Yeah.
Yes, and it's still learning.
Yes.
Even though it's not tests and sitting at a desk, it's still learning, and I think that
Yep.
we just have a real difficulty with
Yep.
learning if it doesn't look like what we envision the little schoolhouse and that's it,
Yes.
and this classroom and that's it. So
Yeah.
I really appreciated, while my friend is horrified, I thought, what
You thought, well,
just
this is kind of brilliant, actually.
yes, and what would and I actually got to talk to kids who were in school and doing different things and just, working and very proud of themselves for their
Yeah.
independence and doing what they wanted to do. And
Yes.
just the way Scotland is set up, they have the option to go back to school.
Yeah.
at any
With
point.
maybe a purpose. If they had something that they're like, you know what? I do want to know about this because I have this thing I want to do, you know?
Yeah,
Um, that just that seems like that would help the mental health crisis we have going on in our kids in the US, you know, so much more confidence building,
yeah,
so much more tailored to what do you want to do? And
yeah.
there's a lot of ways you can learn it. Um, yeah, I love that. Um, what are you working on next? Is there anything coming up? Any more
I
books to
have
look
a
forward
book.
to?
I have a book coming out in January.
Oh, yay.
Um, yes, it is called The Science of Friendship, and it is
Okay.
a story about a girl who was rather unceremoniously shown that the people she hung out with were in fact not her friends. And
Ooh, that's a good topic. Yes.
yeah, even when you discover halfway through, oh, whoops, that's not how friends act. And so
Yes.
she has to kind of put it into her mind why this happened to her, and she's trying to figure out if there are principles in the larger world that she can sort of apply. Like, okay, so I'll know a true friend when I see one if they do X,
Uh-huh.
Y, or Z. So she tries to actually sort of science it out to
Mm-hmm. It was
make
with the
friendship
formula.
exactly, to make it understandable,
Uh-huh.
because she doesn't want to have the old school drama like her mother's generation did.
Yes.
So
Well, don't we all kind of do that too? Like when we go through, we're like, well, I'm never going to do that again. And how will I, know that I'm going back into that kind of thing again? And, you know,
yeah.
well, I'm excited. That will be a great one to pass around. Um, where can people find you and your work?
Well, I have a website, which is just
Yep.
TanitaSDavis.com, which makes it easy.
Yes,
Um,
it's great.
but I have my lone, I'm so terrible on social media,
Oh,
so terrible,
that's
but
I am not I mean, I have to do it sometimes, but I limit because I
yeah,
just it's not where I want to hang out.
no. Occasionally I post pictures of my garden on Instagram at Tanita Writes, but it's
Oh,
it's the very rare visits.
your your loyal friends are like, "Oh, yes, it's been a year, but look at there's her garden."
There's a picture.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
All
But
right.
I'm just not a social media person, so
No, I understand. Well, people can check out your website. Obviously, you can get your books at all the bookstores.
all the bookstores.
I got mine at the library. So love it. But now I'm gonna have to get my own copy because I think I've overextended the the checkout. Um,
Can I send you one? I'd
oh
like to
yeah,
send you one.
I'd love one. A signed
I can do
copy from
that.
you. Oh yeah. Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I was recommending it to all my parents in my group, just like your kids, like they need to know that they're not alone and there's so few there's so few stories like this. So thank you. Is there anything else that you that I missed or that I mean there's so much, but
I am a person who just um am just glad to know that when I stopped being embarrassed about what I perceived to be my deficits,
mm, yeah,
that I was able to have the gift of connecting with other people. I have just
yeah,
been where so many people are struggling
yeah,
and feeling like you're dumb and that
yeah,
it's your fault that the things that you want aren't happening for you. But I just would encourage anybody, whether they
yeah,
are in school or an adult, and you feel like a lot of opportunities have passed you by, just encourage you to, you know, look to your strengths. Remember what you do have. Remember what you
yeah,
can do. I
yeah,
mean, and if you don't remember, literally sit down and think about it,
yeah. Like this
Because,
process of writing the book for you
yeah,
brought those things to mind. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I have struggled with so many things. I did not get my driver's license till I was 28, and I
Yeah.
just avoid driving like the plague
Yeah.
because, you
It
know,
impacts so much of driving.
it does the
Hmm.
spatial things and all of that,
Hmm.
I mean,
We are in driver's ed right now. I
yeah.
know.
It's hard. It
It's
is
hard.
hard, and it
Yeah.
may not come right now.
No.
It'll be there when you are ready for it,
Yep.
you know? So I just really encourage people, you know, you have other gifts
Yeah.
and you've
Yes.
got this.
Yes. I love it. Well, thank you, Tanita. It was really great talking with you. It was a pleasure reading your book, and I'm excited for your next one. And I appreciate you just sharing so real and candidly about this part of your life and encouraging the parents, the kids, the adults. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
All right.